right, welcome everybody to our last conversation here at the end of August. It's hard to believe that another month has gone by. It's just kind of unreal. I was so anxious about all these meetings when we were building up to it, and now they're over. It's almost done. So thanks for joining us tonight, and those of you that are watching us on Zoom, I welcome you as well. Just remember that those of you that are with us on the Zoom call, it looks like everybody's good to go. That you keep your audio and video muted so that what comes up in our archive on Zoom is a clean picture of everything. Um, you will be able to get a PD credit for tonight, and John will put a link up to the certificate in the chat. So, and it works very very well. You just fill in a couple things and you'll get your certificate, within in 5 or 10 minutes. So again, I appreciate all the outreach over the last several weeks and building up to this. It has been a very trying time. Not only the pandemic, but just everything that's been going on. And this has not been an easy week as well that we just got through. So I do appreciate your support and, just the reach out. And I hope even beyond these calls and these conversations that we have, and that we keep supporting each other as best we can. It really does help to know that, folks are in your corner and, educate and uplift people as much as you possibly can. Remembering that our overreaching goal is to share and to serve all of our students better. And I want to include our teachers as well, because, we all need to open our eyes and open our hearts and open our minds and just be a little bit more, I think, observant of what's going on in the world around us and what's affecting our kids in terms of their lives and especially their race and ethnicity, as we're going to talk about now. I know it's a very sensitive topic and it's very difficult to talk with. I've shared that, my family and I have a hard time sometimes just having a civil conversation about it. But I encourage you to continue listening and reaching out and having those difficult conversations, because I think it's super important if we're going to get through this. And we will. It might take a little bit of time, but we will. As far as addressing other ethnicities and things that we can do, I think there's conversations about starting up some other conversations. And certainly if you have ideas for what we can do to expedite that, let John or George know. And I'm sure, we can set up more things, because again, the more we talk and the more we know each other, the better we're going to know each other and be able to fight through the things that cause us difficulties. I encourage you to email me. John will put my email address up on the chat if you're interested in visiting with me and taking this discussion further. I'd be very, very happy to do that. So I'm going to share my screen with you really quickly. I always forget to hit the share screen button. Okay, there we go. So just a quick overview of what we're doing tonight and what we've done the last several weeks. That is our Black Lives Matter statement from our Music Education Association, which, several of the folks who have been on these calls with me have had a part in putting together. And I think it's a great statement. It's very comprehensive. And my suggestion towards the end of it all was just to make sure that we did things to move forward, and hence we are here having our conversations. So we've had some really amazing guests. All of these conversations are archived on the KMEA YouTube page, so you can go back and check them out if you haven't weren't able to be with us live. And we would love for you to do that. Every now and again I check to see how many views, and we've got, most of the sessions are close to, if not over 100 views. So that's encouraging that people are checking it out. And our goals, as I stated before, would be to share our stories, provide insight into improving instruction in a way that will highlight the cultural diversity of our ensembles and classrooms, validate our teachers and students of color, recognize our role in opposing systematic racism, injustice, and oppression that exists in our society. And it's there, folks. It's there. You just, if you don't see it, then you should look a little harder. And then actually I added this goal because of a conversation I had with one of our guests when I was talking to Brittany about um, being on with us. She talked about strategies to increase cultural sensitivity. So we'll get to hopefully hear her address that directly tonight. Each session, just a few minutes of me chatting, which I'm getting ready to be done with. I'm going to try to give our guest about 30 minutes of commentary and then leave some time at the end for questions and comments from the attendees. And so we already talked about muting your audio and video. And if you have a question, raise your hand or send it via chat. And I encourage you to speak up. So, it's okay. We won't bite. And we really want to hear what your questions are. But if you are shy, you can send them privately to me or to John, and we'll make sure that we address what you can as best we can, as best we can. And like I said, you can access the videos from all of the sessions on our YouTube channel in an archive. Really excited to share our first two guests, our last two guests, excuse me. Let's see, James Gregory was in my very first high school band. So that was a long time ago. But I've really gotten to watch him grow as a teacher. And I want to say Brittany and I met when she was a fireball clarinet player at UK when I first got up this way. So I've known Brittany for at least 15 years. I think it's about that right. So I'm going to go ahead and unshare my screen here. And I'm going to let you meet our guests. So we'll start ladies first. Brittany, why don't you hop on here and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I am a very interesting character. I just, in fact, of like how I was created. My dad was in the military. He decided to go to Korea, picked himself up a wifey, brought her back. Then they had me. Hey. I grew up on a base. Like I was born in DC, then we moved overseas to Germany, came back, and then my dad decided to retire at Fort Knox. We stayed there pretty much and all through high school. And when I was there at North Hardin, we had Mr. Campbell, who was my man, and he always was great. When I went on to college, I went to UK, and that was a great experience. And there's some things there, and I'll backtrack when I'm not giving you info on, I guess, just myself, but more of experiences. But after that, I came to North Middle School, and I've taught here for 10 years. This is my 11th year at North Middle, and it's a great middle school, I think, not just because of where it is and what it feeds into, but it's the students and kind of background on the students that we can range anywhere from 72 to 84% free and reduced lunch. And it's how many kids decide to turn in their paper. And we usually are about 50-50 in the building. Maybe, some years it's like 40% white and then 60% a lot of other, which could be Hispanic, which mostly is usually African-American. And then we just started having our Hispanic portion of our student population grow. So it is very cultured. And some of the students that actually mark white are actually mixed, and sometimes they force you to pick one. But it is a very interesting area that I teach in, but I do want to give some insight from student perspective and growing up here. But I'll let Mr. James explain some about himself, and then we can talk about experiences.
Hey, Mr. Gregory, hop on here and tell us a little bit about yourself, my friend.
All right. First of all, I want to say, Ms. Wiggins, Dr. Strobe, Mr. Bolden, thank you for this opportunity to present our stories to the organization. As you mentioned before, Ms. Wiggins, you were my high school director my freshman year. Once upon a time, because our nice, real skinny beanpole was actually in shape and doing all these things, and compared to what I'm doing now. And so I graduated from Greenville High School, which is now Muhlenberg South Middle School due to the consolidation. Many moons ago, I went to Western Kentucky University. Of course, that's where I reconnected with my good friend Darren Abram, kind of followed Troy Stovall along and got connected with Andrew Maroc. So we're kind of the foursome that kind of stayed together, along with a few other folks, but we really kind of stayed close together. We're kind of within the same area and what have you and stuff. But After graduating from Western, my first teaching job was at Hawkinsville Middle School. I did that for a few years. Then I moved up to the high school. And after I did the high school for a few years, I moved over to Owensboro. Of course, I mean, within that time, I've met my wife and we got married and what have you. And she kind of followed along with me and what have you. We went to Owensboro to Apollo High School, stayed there for a little bit. Then we did a second trip back to the Christian County area. Was at Christian County High School. At one point in time, I was kind of dubbed as the Rick Pitino of band in the Christian County area because I both taught at Hoptown and at Christian County. And now I'm currently in my 6th year here at Paducah Tillman High School.
That's all right. Some interesting backgrounds. Gosh, when you said Greenville High School, I just brought back so many memories. That was a very, very interesting time. Well, let's go ahead and get our conversation started. So share some stories with us, and we'll go ladies first again. You know, just some professional or personal experiences you have had, Brittany, just related to your ethnicity, and they can be, we've had people share some things that were uplifting, and we've had some people share things that were challenges. I think you've been on most of the calls with us, so go ahead and share with us. Tell us a little bit about what you're thinking.
I think obviously the current events led me to kind of evaluate my past and maybe people growing up around me and just where we are now as far as the people I work with and in my building and the kids I teach. Like I had to reflect a lot, and I made a huge Facebook post, but a lot of it had to do with, me empathizing with friends, but also understanding that there is an injustice going on right now. And I think that it's really, I'm going to be bold. Like right now, I invited some people that I think would or may not have liked these talks simply because they think that the purpose of Black Lives Matter, or even mentioning that Black Lives Matter, is maybe more of a political statement than really, hey, our lives, those who are colored, we matter. And I think that it's hard sometimes for some people to separate that out and realize that we are experiencing things or have experienced things that, yes, outline that there inherently is racism, whether it be passive or whether it be something that, is overt. And I will say that in middle school is when it was more clear to me, because I said I grew up on a military base. So obviously not really going to find any racism there as far as in the schools. It's very mixed, but very cultural. So when I moved to Hardin County and I went to James C. Alta Middle School, it seemed pretty, cultured. I had people there that were also quote unquote mixed. And then there's, a healthy amount of African-American students. However, there still was a divide in a weird way, even though this is you're talking 2000s, early 2000s or 1999, whatever. But people were still segregated where kids weren't really hanging out with each other. And the big, I guess, event that happened that made me realize that my friends who call themselves my friends are being raised to be racist was when I came in one day and one of my really great friends, Taylor, her father, I guess, had really gotten on her and she was crying. And we were like, hey, what's going on? Why are you so upset? And it turned out because she was dating Lonnie Thunderbird, and he's a basketball player, but he's Black. And, her dad obviously didn't believe in that. And so he grounded her, took her phone, took everything. So she's crying. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so terrible. Like I'm, trying to comfort her. And my teacher walks by. And she's my 7th grade English teacher. I thought the world of her. She's the Beta Club sponsor. And I was, thinking like, oh my God, I would love to be like her when I grow up. And she just made some statement that said, well, why don't you do what your dad asks? And I just kind of looked at her like, who are you? Like, you were not the person I thought you were. But also the fact that you would encourage that means that you agree with it. Because why would you say that if you don't agree with it? And so it started a whole huge conversation between all of our friend groups, because then some of the friend group was like, well, yeah, why are you dating outside of your race? And I was like, is this how you guys feel? You're friends with us. You play basketball with us. You're in band with us, but you feel that way? And they were like, yeah, my parents told me that if you have mixed children, that they won't know who they are. They'll be confused. I'm thinking, who's confused? Because I know who I am. Like, I'm still a wild child. I like to play clarinet. And I study crazy things like on criminals. And I love all kinds of things, but I know that I can pass tests and I'm not confused who I am. So that was something that they were saying, but I was so angry with them, but I was more angry the fact that their parents would kind of create this in them, like this idea. And really, I think ultimately all those kids, I look at them now and I went through Facebook before I made that big post to see what their lives were like, which Facebook allows you to do that. And most of them are, living in white families and married to white women or white men, and they don't have anything really to do with culture. And I'm thinking their parents wanted them to be that way, and then they became that. So those kids grew up thinking that somehow mixing their race or even, having some kind of relationship with an African American person was bad, and that they're growing up that way. So in their mind, there's no way that they can't be thinking that a Black person is less than, or to have your kids be Black would make them less than. So that was kind of hard growing up. And I think that was the opening. And so through high school, a lot of the kids didn't care about race, and that was cool because I hung out with a completely different, bando type. And we really didn't have any racial issues in high school. But then fast forward, I got to UK, and I remember I just knew that I liked Wildcats, and I didn't ever really thought about anything. I liked blue. I was like, well, I've been blue all my life. May as well keep going blue, I guess. And I love Dr. Wright, so I decided to go to UK. And a counselor at the office really kind of was disappointing because she was talking to me, but she's like, do you really want to go and be a small fish in a big sea, or maybe something would be easier for you to be successful if you went to WKU? And I was like, well, first of all, what does that say about WKU? And second of all, why are you telling me to kind of dumb myself down? And why are you talking to me that way? I had no idea, but obviously I have to prove people wrong. So went on in my life, went to UK. Now, when I got there, I was the first day I was in shock. I'm not going to lie. And it's not any fault of UK or UK bands or anything like that. It's just, there's a lack of diversity, and I didn't know that when I was there. So I showed up and there were literally 5 people of color, because 2 of those people, were, I think, mixed of some sort, but I don't really know if they were African American. But then there were definitely 3 people that were African American. So I was in shock. And I think there were other people who were in shock who were white, who did not have friends of color, maybe. So they had a lot of side comments that I don't think they realized were really, like when you're calling someone a little mochaccino or cappuccino, or my milk chocolate. Oh, there's my milk chocolate every time I'm going to class. It's like degrading. And I had a head with someone there, but ultimately it was about, I'm a person. My name is Brittany, and I play clarinet, and you don't have to call me milk chocolate every day because I'm a person. So I think that there are people that are raised in a way that, I don't think they realize that their vantage point and their perspective, ultimately they're looking through a lens where they have racism and they don't realize it.
Well, that's really interesting. You brought up a lot of interesting points that have come up in other conversations, and I really do appreciate your candor with what you've been through. I can recall a conversation, a Facebook post from a young man that I went to high school with. It was just really, I don't know how to say, it was just ugly and ignorant about mixing of races and how that was not to be tolerated. And I just know one of my best friends happens to be half Japanese, and that was the culture, that was the ethnicity that came up. And I just was like, she's one of the smartest people I know, smartest and brightest people I know, a great teacher. How can you possibly say that? But that is, I agree with you 100%. That is something that is learned and is cultured in kids from a very young age. And like you said, in some cases, they just don't get past that. And it is a lessening. I like the point that you brought up, that it is a lessening of the value of somebody if you decide they're not, you can't, mix races or things like that. So I really appreciate you bringing that topic up. Well done. Mr. Gregory, you want to jump in here and share with us a little bit?
Yes, of course, as you know, coming from Greenville, you know what Greenville's like, Middleburg County is like, you know, coming from a small town and what have you. And for me, you know, I was in a few different circles. You know, I was on the band side, I was with the athletes. So, you know, I hung out with a different mixture of folks. You know, there was always folks that looked like me in the classroom as far as other students, what have you. But as far as teachers go, when I was in school, I think I may have had two black teachers. One of them was, of course, was you, and an assistant football coach I had, I think, in eighth grade. I think Coach Crawford, in eighth grade, the science teacher at that time. Or, you know, so of course, you know, me being an African American male, one thing I always talk about is you doing sports. So I was on this kick. Okay, you know, I'm going to grow. I'm going to be about 6'5". I'm going to be 6'6". I'm going to go to UK. I'm going to play ball, or I'll be 6 foot tall. I'm going to weigh about 210, 215 pounds. And I'm going to go to Notre Dame. I'm going to play football, you know, because a lot of folks, you know, I was pretty good in those things at that time and stuff. So, but seeing you on the podium my freshman year, you know, it was like, you know, I'm not going to be 6'6". I'm 6 foot. You know, I got a decent game, but I'm not going to be able to play at the next level. I definitely don't want to play football at the next level because those guys hit really hard. I don't want to get hit like that. But, you know, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good with this band thing. You know, I play my horn pretty well. You know, I said there's not many folks that look like me. So this is an opportunity to kind of, hey, you know, if I get pretty good at this, some other folks that might look like me may want to follow this route. And, you know, and seeing you that 1 year that you was with a Greenville, I was like, well, you know, I think I have this opportunity to do this. And, you know, so I hung out with, like I said, I hung out with different groups. I was with different ethnicity groups and stuff. And then everybody got along with everybody. Were comfortable with each other. Then as I make my way to Western, of course, when Western have been a small handful of us in a particular group, you might have one or two, you know, which I was okay with that because depending on which group I was hanging out with at that time, sometimes I was the only one, or I might have another friend that would tag along with me, you know, and of course, everybody was comfortable, everybody there at home. But when I went to Western or when I moved to Bowling Green, you know, it felt really different. It's like, okay, yeah, I don't think you used to be around folks that look like me, depending on the group of folks that we were running with. You know, I said, that's okay, but let me help you out with that a little bit and what have you and stuff. So, and of course, professionally, my wife gets this all the time. She used to work in community-based services in Orange when we were living in Owensboro. And she had this client call her one day and was talking. Actually, the client came in and was visiting with her, and she was talking and stuff. And she said, well, what brings you to Owensboro? I said, well, my husband, he's the band director at Apollo High School. And the lady looked at her, she goes, is your husband white? And she's like, no, he's African American. She's like, really? He's African American and he's doing band? Really? She's like, yeah, he does band. You know, he does a pretty good job at it. And, you know, we sit and we laugh and we shake our heads and say, just, you know, people just don't get it. And, you know, and stuff. So, but that was kind of how my background was. I'm used to being either the only one or plus one and different groups and stuff. And I just learned how to navigate through that to get to whatever I was trying to get to at that point in time.
Good points, James. I appreciate you sharing those. I know that I haven't talked very much about my college experience. I went to Austin Peay State University for my undergrad, and I want to say that with Clarksville being so close to the Army base, like Brittany was sharing, and other folks who have grown up in military families, it was a pretty diverse town. But however, on campus, And my best friend, who is black, it was a piano major at the time at Ossipee State University. But I recall that you know, friends mixed, and there were different companies. But when it came to fraternities and social things like that, it was very divided. You know, the black kids did this, the white kids did that. I wanted to join AKA with my sister, but I couldn't, which is a ladies' black fraternity. I couldn't do that because of my music schedule. So, you know, I felt like I was really kind of cut off from a part of my culture that I missed out on. I just didn't have time to do that. So we were talking last week about kind of losing your blackness a little bit, you know, because the opportunities didn't present themselves. So your college experiences are really interesting. And James, I wanted you, you know, maybe to elaborate a little bit more on what you talked about, your challenge, or your having not seen very many black people in the band world. I kind of got the feeling that, you know, getting to see somebody like me that looked like you kind of inspired you to jump in, even though it was not, and it was even less diverse than it is now at the time you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because at that time, in the district that we were in, I think it was you and Charles French, if I'm thinking correctly. I think he was at Adairsville at that particular time, or were the only African Americans that were that were teaching at that time. And I figured, you know, you gave me a chance, and seeing that maybe I could be that way for some kids growing up as I further along with my career.
So, Brittany, talk to us a little bit about teaching school-related experiences, if you don't mind to share with us. You've been at a couple different places, and I'm going to apologize in advance while I'm talking, because I thought the were going to make it, and they are not even close. So if you hear them chatting in the background, they just want to be a part of the conversation too. So, Brittany, if you don't mind to share.
I think I mentioned earlier, like, I think it's a unique situation that I'm in, being a person of color and teaching at a school where there are a lot of students of color. I will say that there have been experiences within my building that are, you know, unique, because you're dealing with teachers and some that are not culturally sensitive, even though they work at my school. I mean, I talked to David, he's on this call, but he knows, like, I'm about to raise a very fun conversation, because I've taken note and have mentioned that there's a teacher that drives to school every day with a Confederate flag. And I'm like, but you teach at our school. And, you know, when that student, there's a student that says this teacher treats me differently, I don't invalidate any of my students' feelings, because they know in their heart how they feel, how they've been treated. And I try to help them with perspective. And I think that my position allows me to do that. I've had hard conversations with kids who, you know, we have to talk about that. We have to talk about, this may be the only interaction that you have with this student. And currently, this is what people think. And so what are we doing to educate them? And I'm having these conversations with 12-year-olds and 11-year-olds, which it's important, because I really do think that in middle school, that was a huge moment for a lot of those kids. And some of them buckled down in their parents' axioms, and some of them didn't. And I just, you know, I think it's a unique age group of where their perspective can change, and that maybe they can grow up different than whatever they're being taught. So it's definitely, and I think there's some teachers in my building that also know that there's like maybe 2 or 3 actual teachers of color who can talk to the students about how they feel when they're treated. And I've talked to a teacher before. I said, hey, have you noticed that when you write people up, most of them are Black? Like, and this is how the students are feeling, because they feel like, you know, they can record a kid doing the same thing, and they have, and they're not written up. And then I'm just asking you to see that maybe there's something there. Maybe when you're looking at these kids, you're feeling like, oh, that's a bad action because, and it's not overt racism. It's not, that's the problem, is that people think that everybody's wearing like white hoods or something. That's not it at all. The problem is the people that are afraid of Black people because of what they've seen on the TV, or what they, you know, think is right because they've watched a certain news channel. So that's kind of like what's scary, and what I've been trying to work on with my students is just, what do you do to fight that? I had a kid on day one that wanted to put on a Trump hat. And, that already stirred up a problem. And I had a kid that stood up and said, you know what, I really am tired of this Black Lives Matter. So how did I address that? There are several ways. I could have got mad, I could have ripped this kid up, but the explanation came from, I guess, me trying to empathize with this kid and understand where he was coming from. And obviously it's what he's heard at home. So how do I get that kid to see differently? And so it's been a very unique experience for the last few months, obviously because of the pandemic, but really it's been trying to help younger kids navigate through that, and especially younger kids of color navigate through that. And I don't, like I said, it's a unique place, and I love teaching there simply because of that. And I've stayed there that long really because those kids probably need it the most, the coaching from someone who looks like them, who, have gone through things like them. So.
Wow, those are some really interesting stories. So, how do you deal with that when if somebody comes in with a Trump hat, or somebody yells, "I'm tired of this Black Lives Matter thing"? I mean, how is it that you're able to deal with that in a way that's productive?
I think it's hard, but it's asking them to empathize and to understand. Like, it's tired of. I said it is. I think when that kid immediately said that, I said, I understand. And so the other kids, when they're watching my reaction, of course, they're like, what's about to happen? Like, because they're ready to fight too. And I'm just like, it's interesting that you say that, because I think that it is a very tiresome, like, conversation. And it is tiring when people are fighting for rights that everyone thinks they have, but through their own personal experiences, they don't. And so then the explanation comes from, you and I may see each other equally, but it doesn't mean that some other random person sees me the same way that you do, or sees, and I'll just say Anaya the same way that you do, or, so we kind of navigated it that way. And I think that settled that kid a little bit, because he kind of just realized, like, yeah, it is a big deal. And maybe it's presented to him in a different way, but we kind of navigated through. It is hard, and it feels like everybody's fighting, because in their eyes, it felt like everybody is fighting and we're on like a precipice of a civil war, which may or may not be true. But at the end of the day, it's trying to empathize and getting them to not buy into a lot of the hatred of it, and just realize it's just trying to understand perspective. That's why I like the conversation's called, where do we go from here? I don't think it's like, hey, we're all getting guns or we're going to fight each other, the end. I think it's, we've got to start understanding and learning from each other, like, hey, what are these experiences? Hey, how can I draw in my African-American students? And, like, even with Chase, I think that he, bringing up Anthony McGill, that was huge for me as well. Being in college, I'm like, I don't see anybody. And then all of a sudden this dude's on TV playing with Obama. Awesome. So, there's that. I mean, I remember you, Miss Wiggins, like way back when I was in school, and I'm like, they have black band directors, and you were doing an honor band. You were honor band for band B, and you were doing All the Pretty Horses. But I was watching you and I was like, wow, black band director. I've got all these white people, there are black ones. Okay, cool. So, I mean, they're just different people that aren't exposed to stuff. And I'm trying to get kids to see that, like, especially the kids in my school, because I think it's dangerous if they grow up as angry with no real solution, or able to meet in the middle on some things and understand, there is a lot of strife, there is a lot of anxiety and animosity, and I don't want them to grow up that way, because I think it's dangerous for them to assume that every person who doesn't have color, isn't on their side. And I've dealt with a student like that, and I think Mr. Reams is on here, and I think he knows who I'm talking about. And she was so talented. She played for Joe Alessi. She was one of the most talented students that I've ever taught in my life. She had more talent in her finger than I could ever think about having. And the only thing that stood in her way of her success, I would have given her anything. Literally, I would have bought her a trombone. She was so amazing, but it was her perspective and the way that she grew up, is that you don't trust white people. You don't trust what they have to say. And that ultimately caused her to not succeed with, obviously, Mr. Reams and Mr. Froedge, and in her high school as well. And she kind of fell back into, and there are other factors here, and that's why when we get to what I want to share with you guys as far as learning about students, again, in my area, it's not just the high diversity, but there, along with that, is a high amount of students who are at risk and a high amount of students who are free and reduced lunch, which obviously tells you that there's financial strains in the family. So there's a lot of different things that I work with all at the same time that I try to help understand the students and try to help them so that they can become successful.
That's really good. I really like that you brought up perspective, because that's a huge thing. Just being able to let kids help kids learn to get into other kids' mind, because, and I said this to my students a lot as well, you can't change how I see things, just like I can't change how you see things. So, I think it is a huge challenge to make sure, that we're thinking along those lines about, well, why is this happening? If there's a behavior problem or kids are anxious toward each other or there's strife in the room, why is that happening? And, I think one of the hardest things we have to do is look in the mirror and ask yourself. I tend to be one of those type of people when things are going wrong. The first thing I think is, what did I do? And, what can I do better? So some really nice commentary there, and an excellent, way to kind of diffuse the situation. So I appreciate you sharing that. James, you want to share a little bit about some school-related experiences you might have had?
I remember, this is probably one that comes to mind. It was maybe about 10, 15 years ago. I went on a job interview in the western part of the state. And as I arrived, of course, I met the principal. We talked a little bit. So, okay, we'll get you in here. We'll get you set up. We'll get things going. And so I walked in and I sat down, and I had this gentleman that was on the interview panel looked at me and said, we never thought that people that look like you could actually do a job like this. First thing he said, as soon as I walked in, normally I would get the, hey, what are you doing applying for this job? And I thought, like, hey, there's an opening. Oh, we thought we just wanted assistant football coaches, which that's bad enough. But I mean, this particular person said, we did not know that folks like you can run programs like this. And so, well, sir, there are quite a few folks that are going to be out here that look like me, can do an exceptional job running programs just like this. And the guy was kind of taking the bag, and a few other folks. And there was one other person I knew that was on a panel. He was kind of sinking his chair. He's like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy just did this. So we went on with the interview and went through different things. And this particular person was being challenging with that. And I just told this particular person, so look, you have to accept that. This is how I look. This is what I do. And if this is something that you or your student can't handle, then you may have to pick another program. I said, also, with the opportunity of me being here, this is an opportunity to kind of see things on the other side. How things are done. Well, you kind of used to seeing things a particular way, but here's the opportunity to see something different. And who knows, if you stick around long enough and give it a chance, you might like that difference. And so the interview ends. And of course, I visited a friend that was close by to the place that I interviewed, told him about it. And we had a good laugh. And it's like, man, we can't believe this. Yeah, it was in 2006. And so I was coming home. I called my wife and she said, well, how'd it go? I said, dear, I don't think they're ready for somebody that looks like me to be in front of their kids. She goes, what do you mean? And I explained it, and I told her the story and what happened. She's like, you got to be kidding me. Are you serious? I'm like, yeah. I said, I'm serious. I mean, the guy was just flat out. I mean, just bold, just said that. And I was like, okay, well. So that's one of the experiences I had. Usually the experience I would get, especially when I was at Hawkinsville and more at Apollo, I remember there was a time that, of course, Burns Middle School was the feeder into Apollo. And I had actually time on my schedule to actually go and be at the middle school and help out when I have you. And this was for about 2 weeks straight. I would go and check in. I said, well, I'm here to see, I forget who was teaching at the middle school at the time. I'm here to see Miss So-and-so. well, you know they're in class right now, don't you? Yes, I do know they're in class. They're expecting me. Well, why do you want to come down here and visit with Miss So-and-so? Well, considering I'm the high school band director at Apollo, and this is one of my feeder schools, I kind of want to be here to help out so those kids get the chance to know me and what have you and stuff. And then the person's like, are you really the band director at Apollo? I'm like, yes, I am really the band director at Apollo. Of course, keep in mind at Apollo and the Davis County school system, especially on that side of town, there were maybe 10, 15 Black kids that were in school at that time. And of course, they just recently, I think, maybe 2-3 years prior before I got there, they hired Tom Purcell, who was the first Black principal in that building. So they were still adjusting with things. And so, but 2 weeks go by, and then these group of parents, the volunteers that were working at the middle school saw the band at the football game, came to a home football game. And then they've originally, when they saw who it was and saw what I was doing with the band, that following Monday I come in, they're like, hey, Mr. Gregory, how you doing today? The band looked really good. Are you here to see Miss So-and-so? They say, yes. I say, oh, yeah, come on back. I mean, the whole thing changed, and for a lot of folks, it's kind of one of those, okay, you look different from what we're normally seeing. And then when they see you in action, they're like, oh, okay, well, they actually do know what they're talking about. Okay, I think it's going to be okay. And it's a shame that it takes something like that to finally for folks to get a clip.
I think that's really interesting that you bring up the job interview situation. I want to say I was very fortunate in the positions that I eventually took, that I came into it knowing people who knew me. So they weren't shocked when a Black woman walked in to be the band director. A lot of the kids were, and a lot of the parents were when it ultimately happened. I only had one situation where the principal asked me if I thought I could keep, and this was, when I was first looking for a job. So way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, the principal asked if I could keep my distance from the boys in the band because they had issue with that kind of thing with folks who looked like me. And I was shell shocked. I didn't even know how to answer them. And I remember getting home from that interview and telling my dad about it. And I just told my dad, I said, I don't even care if they offer the job to me. I don't want to work there. I just don't think that would be a place that I would be very comfortable in. Some really great things that you guys are bringing up and sharing with us. I want to move ahead. I've got two more topics that I want to talk about, and I'm looking at the time. So I have two things, and you can I'll let you guys decide which one you want to share on. So my first question is, how do we move forward? And my second would be if you have any reading materials or literature or things like that you would like to share. I'm also going to encourage anybody that's listening on our live Zoom, if you have resources that have been helpful to you, to please put them in the comments. And what I'm going to do now that we're getting ready to be done with these sessions is I'm going to compile all of those. And I've been saving the chats and give them to John so that he can distribute it. So if you have reading materials and you're listening, and you want to share those, please do, so we can get them out to everybody. And then I'll let Brittany go first. And you can pick. You can talk about how we move forward or some suggested reading materials and literature.
Okay. I will leave with a YouTube link because I thought, like everybody's getting different reading materials, and I want you to at least, and the people that participate, at least look at something that they can take away, not get overwhelmed by it. When I first started teaching, I read like The Children of E4, which was about teaching kids of poverty. And I only mention this because I think that when I recognize like the students that do get along and the students that don't get along and kind of get lost in the cracks or don't relate well at, different programs, like when I go in to help, it's not the students that are from middle class that, are of color, whether it's Hispanic or they're Black. It's really the students, and it's kind of correlated, the students that they have several different things against them, including being at risk because of their financial status, and also they may be at, an at-risk group of whether they're dealing with racism or whether they're dealing with inequality. Like that's something that I think is huge of what I target and what I encourage other people to target is to find those kids. But relating to those kids are hard and understanding those kids are hard. Just like with that one student who was extremely talented, who ultimately did not end up making it through. She came from a background where, she straight up told me in 8th grade, like, hey, my house holds a lot of fugitives. People run through my house all the time. And they're always running from the police. She didn't grow up respecting the law really because everybody around her didn't. So it's hard to relate to those students, hard to understand those students, but there's like there's a YouTube video that I watched as a TED Talk, and it's from Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, and she's like the Surgeon General of California right now. And she kind of explains kind of their approach to treating children emotionally, and especially children who may be dealing with things that you have no idea about. And it is just unreal how many things that I've dealt with students, which you wouldn't have known. And maybe they're so angry, or maybe they're, disrespectful, and there's a reason. Like if you look at them and know that there's a reason, there's empathy and there's a way to help them, I guess. And there's just a lot of things that go on within a community, like even when you talk about Weston Louisville, and Linda knows this, like people from the community are trying so hard to create things to build the students, to build the children, to give them an out, to get them to be more than people expect them to be. But it's hard because there's so many different things to address that you have to address. So anyway, this TED Talk that I'm going to share, it is really awakening, I think, for a person to understand that there are a lot of battles on that side, and to relate to those students that you really, they are a joy to have. And it's even more of a joy if you can help them leap into college or leap into, just getting out of their situations. Like those are the students that I look to really empower, I guess. So I'm going to put that in the chat, share this link, and you can watch on your own time. But it's just striking. So just an offer on the where to go from here. I just think of, like I said, empathy, sharing with each other, and being bold enough to talk to your peers and your colleagues, but, like not disrespectfully, but just as a matter of fact of what is acceptable and what is not, and making sure that they understand, we are people. The African American race is not Black Lives Matter as a, some kind of group. It is a literal idea that we have, crazy, but that Black lives do matter. And I think it's important to empathize and help everybody else learn how to empathize.
I agree with you. And it looks like we've got your link up, and I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, Brittany is being bold and saying a lot of really good, saying a lot of really important things, and things that really kind of, that have been so weary on my heart. Is, especially this summer, I was in a conversation with my niece when there was, we watched the gentleman die on TV. And she said, why does this upset you so? Why does this one upset you so much, Aunt Lois? And I just said, I've been mad for so long. And it just, seems to be happening over and over again. It's just really something that, as an African-American person, it is so hard to watch. And like Brittany said, if you can have some empathy, just try to get in our heads a little bit. And when that's what you see so much of the time on the national media, it makes me weary. And, there are some days I get up and I have to work hard to not be weary. I think these conversations are good. And I hope that those of you that are listening and watching will just have some conversations. It is overwhelming for me. Yeah, I'm certain that if it's a way that you haven't really thought, and I believe there's good in most everyone. But if it's something that you don't have to absorb in your culture on a daily basis, then I think it's hard to have empathy for that. Looking again at perspectives. So I would really encourage you to do that, for Black Lives and for all of our kids who might be struggling. So James, did you have anything that you wanted to share on either one or both of those two topics?
Well, I agree with what Brittany was saying. Empathy, just being relatable for those kids that we're trying to relate to. Because my wife and I, we talk all the time. We like, well, I saw this kid today. I saw this particular kid today. I said, I can't understand why they're acting this way. I said, well, honey, they're acting this way because there are situations at home, and when I have conversations with our African American kids, sometimes I'm like, and when once we get down to the root, okay, why are you acting this way? Why are you tripping in my classroom? Why are we going this route? Well, Mr. Gregory, I'm sorry for doing that because this is what's going on at home. Okay, I can relate to that. In our case, we can kind of relate. Some of us can relate to what's going on in their households when they come and talk to us about those things. And I remember a situation, there was a kid that was being mistreated and certain things were going on with our household, and the kid come talk to me about it. And I said, yeah, I remember that. I said, I was maybe I was about your age when all this was going on. I said, this is how I dealt with it. Gave him some, some talking points and some things to work with, to help him get through those situations. And I hear from the kid from time to time. Now, I haven't heard from him here lately. He moved to Oklahoma. And what happened? It just one day he just had an outburst in the class. And I said, look, man, we're not going to have that. We can take a step outside. So we went out and he talked to me about it. And once I got him calmed down, when we talked about different things, and after we kind of worked through those different situations, like, Miss Gregory, you actually all right. I said, well, I try to be. I try really hard. But I think that's the one thing. And those folks that are dealing with folks that look like us, just because the appearance that maybe appeared to be a thug or a hard case or an at-risk kid, maybe they're not. But you got the whole, the look at it, because, unfortunately for a lot of folks, perception is today's reality, which, for a lot of folks, you may perceive me walking down the street, okay, this guy is getting ready to rob this place and rob that place. Well, no, I'm not going to do any of those things because I'm the band director for Duke until my high school, and you can't just because I look this particular way, you can't perceive that I'm those things. That's just my point of view with that. Now, as far as reading goes, here lately, I've been reading all the stuff that I've been posted up on Teams and that students have been responding to and what have you. But my wife has introduced me to Don Lemon's podcast, Silence is Not an Option, which is pretty cool. I think you should check it out sometime.
Have you guys seen Crash?
Yes.
I mean, I have. What's crazy is that movie was too, yes.
Yes.
It's weird because it's 2006 and you look at all these things and it's like, nothing has changed. It's weird. Like someone who thought, and that the biggest point in that one, that movie for me is the very end, is that someone who thought that they weren't a racist was one through, their mind. And they ended up making a fatal mistake because of that. And that's something that, it's scary. When we talk about Black Lives Matter and this whole police ordeal, and when I talk about empathy, I think from both sides, some teacher at my school before school was having this conversation. He is obviously an advocate for Black Lives Matter, tall white guy, and he's police in the middle of our building. And he says it to a person and doesn't realize she's married to a cop. And so then that creates divisiveness because it's hard for her to now empathize and understand what's going on because now it feels like her and her family are being attacked. So I just think that that's important. That's what I was going to say is just, it's so weird that we're talking about this conversation, and that's a movie from 2006, but these are, I think to change it, it's everything is to understand that you're, James Gregory and this person's Michael and this is Lois and see us as people and us help them understand, I guess. And really those people who are on here that aren't of color, that they reach out to those students who may feel alienated even when they don't say that they feel alienated, and make them feel like you are someone that can shelter them and that you stand for them.
That movie was on the other night. I saw it when it first came out, and boy, you talk about a powerful movie. And it was on the other night, and I watched it again, and I had the same reaction that you did. It's like that's now. That's what's going on now. It's a tough movie to watch, folks, but I think you should jump in and definitely check it out if you get the opportunity to see that. So, oh man, we only have 5 minutes left. So this has been such a very good conversation, and I'm seeing all these great faces of folks who have been with me, and I suspect they might be up to a little something. I don't know what's going on here, but anyway, okay, I don't know what y'all are doing and why I see all your faces, but I wanted to share with you that I see. Should I stop talking, or what are y'all doing?
No,
Okay.
keep going, finish it
Okay,
up, wrap it up.
yeah, just a little bit. Okay, so let me do this real quick. I want to share my screen with you one more time because I want to do some quick little takeaways with you. From our sessions that we've had, and then whatever you guys are up to, I'll let you be up to that. I don't know. Okay, let me do that real quick. Let me try this again because I'm not very good at it. Let's see. I'm going to try that. All right, and I want to go to that screen. I want to share. Boom. So here we go. So I'm going to encourage you to reach out to colleagues and create a better community in KVA music education profession. And you have to reach out, folks. You have to reach out. You can't be shy. You have to talk to people about what's going on and what we're doing. I encourage you to read and research. And please don't make Twitter and Facebook your main source of reading and research. I need you to think about who wrote it and why they wrote it. What was their purpose behind that? And if you don't know, ask questions. Be a part of the positive conversation. I encourage you, like all of our guests have alluded to bring lots of culture into your classroom and rehearsal halls with a variety of composers, conductors, clinicians, and music, and strive to become anti-racist. Just strive to become anti-racist. Check yourself out in the mirror and decide, maybe you just have some tendencies that you are not being aware of. But like Darren said last week, sometimes some very well-intended people end up saying some things that are hurtful or just not very smart. So this has been such a great growing experience for me. I hope that everybody that's been a part of this has gotten to learn a little bit more about us as a community. And yeah, I'm glad that we had the opportunity to be together on this. So if anybody else has any comments, now would be the time. And
you need to go check your door. Yeah, you need to go check your door.
Okay, hold on just 1 second.
Okay.
So I'm all in the meeting right now. You all are crazy. Look at you. Come on in. Oh,
Girl, you better turn that camera back on.
Right.
We try to see.
Oh. So what do I do?
Oh, hey, Michael. Yes.
Sorry, you guys, the dogs are barking, and I hope you can see me okay. You all are sneaky little snakes. What is apple? Oh my God, what is that?
What else did she get?
I know. I'm like, Michael, unmute your mic, boy.
Ooh. Y'all fine.
Right.
I was not gonna open the door, just so you all know.
Oh, we know.
Apricot, right there, great soda. That's too funny. Too funny. How nice. How nice. And is this a cup?
Yeah,
It's a cup.
you love that Yeti so much.
Oh my goodness. I love my Yeti. Don't mess with me and my Yeti. So look at y'all. Oh my gracious. And it's purple, my favorite color. So y'all can sneak it around. Well, come in here. Let's do this real quick. We'll try to social distance as best we can.
Okay.
Come on in here. And don't look at all the stuff that you see.
Yeah, I'm a hot ball.
Okay, when she does on her.
There we go. So yes, sneaky sneaks. Thank you all. Thank you all, and thanks again. Okay, I'm gonna cry. Y'all are so sweet. I appreciate it all, and thank you for sharing your stories with us. And let's keep this conversation going. So I appreciate it, and I love the gifts.
Thank you for
so
leading
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
My
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank
My
you, Lois.
pleasure.
Thank you, Lois.
Bye.
You're welcome.
Yes.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Lois.
You are welcome. We'll see you all very soon. Oh, my
Bye-bye.
gracious.